Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today I'm recording paper 2 of chemistry 5070 O levels paper. This is basically the second variant and this is the winter paper. So without any further ado, let's get started. We're gonna get started from section A. We have two sections in this paper, A and B. So as we can see over here, this completely contains 45 marks, the total section, and we're supposed to answer all the questions in this section. So if we look at question number 1, it says, choose from the following compound to answer these questions. So we have a list of compounds provided. This question is basically a question that comes in every paper. It follows the same format. We'll have different compounds, we'll have different parts, these question parts, alright. We might have different like requirement, but it is going to be on the same format most of the times. Okay, so if we see which compound, question 1 part A says, which compound is a gas that dissolves in water to form an alkaline solution? Also we missed this, that the compound may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Alright, so let's get started. A compound that is a gas which dissolves in water to form an alkaline solution. Alkaline solution, whenever we dissolve, there's mainly one gas which we dissolve in water and it forms an alkaline solution, which is ammonia. It's a fact that we have been studying since the beginning of our chemistry classes. So it's no doubt ammonia, which is over here in the list. Moving on to part B. It is an anhydrous solid which is used for the test of water. Anhydrous solid used for the test of water, we do not use aluminium sulfate, none of these. We basically use copper and copper 2 sulfate. Here we have it. So copper 2 sulfate is used for the test of water. Alright. Now part C says it contains an ions with a 3 positive charge. So we have a list of it, and basically over here we are only talking about compounds. There's a list of compounds. So we need to find such a compound which has a 3 positive charge in it. And for this, sodium chloride, it's NaCl, which has +1 charge. Potassium again does not have +3. Hydrogen, H plus Cl minus. Copper 2 sulfate, as you can see, 2 plus charge, so it's not copper 2 sulfate. Not even carbon dioxide, neither this, calcium carbonate, ammonia. It's basically aluminium sulfate. If you look in the periodic table, aluminium sulfate is from group 3, and since it is a compound with sulfate, it has sulfate compound in it, so it has a +3 like charge on it. So moving on to part D, it is a solid used in flue gas desulfurization. A solid that is used in flue gas desulfurization, again it's a fact, and the answer for it is calcium carbonate. However, you'll see in the list, and here we have it, calcium carbonate. Alright, now moving on to part E, it causes eutrophication. So eutrophication are caused by chemicals that are added in fertilizer, because in fertilizer it's dissolved in water, so they move into the liver, causing eutrophication. And for eutrophication, we basically need to have some compound which has nitrate in it. So if we look at it, we have potassium nitrate. So the answer for this is potassium nitrate. And 5 questions, 5 marks. It's an easy gain mark, alright. Like, mostly questions are simpler. At times, students do get stuck at any certain question, and I would recommend, if you get stuck at a certain question, just leave it and move on, since it's only of 1 mark. And if you have time in the end of the paper, you can think about it or work on it, but you can easily skip any question, because if you don't remember a fact, you won't remember it the next minute. You might need more time, or you can even skip it. Again, it's only a 1 mark. Moving on to part 2, question number 2. Part of the structures of chlorine and sodium chloride are shown. Explain in terms of structure and bonding why chlorine has a low boiling point and sodium chloride has a higher boiling point. Okay, so as we can see, these are chlorine, the structures are given to us. This is chlorine structure and this is sodium chloride. Chlorine is a gas and sodium chloride is a salt, which is a solid. Alright. So basically chlorine is a very simple molecule. Okay, it does not have ions in it. So that is why it has a lower boiling point as compared to NaCl, since NaCl is an ionic compound. Alright, so this is one of the reasons why the boiling point differs. And then again, moving on, for chlorine, it has very weak attractive force, so it does not require a higher temperature. Even at lower temperature, boiling can take place, while NaCl has really tight bonds. Its intermolecular forces are very high, so that is why it requires a higher boiling point. And okay, first let's see the marks. Okay, we have 3 marks. So I told you 2 reasons right now, and the third reason can be that sodium chloride has strong attractive forces between the ions. Alright, the forces between the ions are really strong. So that is why. Okay, so once again I am repeating all of this. Chlorine is a simple molecule, and while this is an ionic molecule, point number 1. Point number 2 is it has weaker molecular forces, while it has intermolecular forces are stronger. Alright, like it's weak for chlorine and stronger for sodium chloride. Comparatively, we can say that. Alright, so this, you can compare them again. This is the second point. And the last point is that their forces between each other is stronger. Like NaCl has stronger forces between them, the attractive forces between the ions. Remember to always mention when you're talking about molecules and ions, otherwise you might end up losing a mark, because ions and molecular forces are two different things. So the ionic forces is really strong here, while it does not have really strong attractive forces between them. Moving on to part B, write the electronic configuration for a chlorine atom. A chlorine atom usually have, if we move in the periodic table, that's at the end of the page. Okay, so where can we find chlorine? It's in group 7. So this is chlorine over here, and as we can see, chlorine has 17 protons or electrons in it basically. Because over here the question talks about, if we go to the question, it talks about the electronic configuration of an atom. Alright, so remember we are going to consider it 17 for both proton and electron. If it was an ion, we would of course have changes accordingly. But here we are talking about the atom. So how to make it 17? The first shell would always have 2. And then the second has a capacity for 8. So if we put 8 in the second shell, it's going to make 10, and then it has greater capacity, the third one. However, we need to now see that how much is left for 17 to be completed, like 17 electrons to be completed. So it's 8, 9, 10, and for 17, it's of course 17 minus 10, which means 7 is left, so 7 can be accommodated. Although it has greater capacity, but chlorine atom can only hold this much. Alright, that is why we are going to write 7 over here. Moving on to part C, the electrolysis of molten sodium chloride is carried out using graphite electrodes. State the meaning of the term electrolysis. So here now this question is talking about electrolysis of a molten sodium chloride, and with the electrodes present in it, which is made up of graphite. So basically electrolysis, first of all the definition of it is a decomposition process of electrolyte using electric current. Okay, this is a very simple definition that we have all been learning, and we all know the meaning of it, that we need to basically cause decomposition of an electrolyte. Like if we need to decompose anything that is put in the form of electrolyte in the process of electrolysis, and then after it we pass electric current through it, we use batteries, usually DC source, and we can cause a decomposition of that electrolyte, of that chemical, of that compound. Alright, so moving on to part 2, state the direction of movement of both the positive and negative ions when molten sodium chloride is electrolyzed. So positive ions are at the negative electrode. We're talking about the direction, alright? So they move to the negative electrode while the negative ions move to the positive electrode, which is a very natural process because that is how they're meant to be. You cannot have positive and positive on the same. Positive ions and positive electrode cannot be attractive. Like it cannot pull the same ions to itself. Alright, that is why positive will move towards negative electrode and negative will move towards positive electrode. One more question, very simple. Moving on to part 3, state one observation that can be made at the positive electrode when molten sodium chloride is electrolyzed. So when molten sodium chloride is electrolyzed, so there is a green gas that is formed, alright, and this is what we can see, like this is what we'll observe, alright, at the positive electrode. Now part 4 says, give the formula of the two negative ions present in aqueous sodium chloride. We're supposed to write a formula over here for the two negative ions. Let's mark this, okay? And basically there are two negative ions over here. So we have sodium chloride, which is NaCl, and we have aqueous. Aqueous means it contains water, so it has H2O. Now if we talk about H2O, it has H plus, the positive ion, and OH minus, the negative ion. Alright, and if we talk about NaCl, we have Na plus as the positive one, and Cl minus as the negative one. So we basically have two positive ions and two negative. So the answer for this, since it has asked for negative ions only, so the answer for this is supposed to be OH minus and Cl minus. Alright, these are the two things you're supposed to write. Do not write this. Like, this is correct, but the question does not ask for it. So make sure you only mention OH minus and Cl minus, since we are supposed to mention two negative ions. Alright, moving on to part D. When aqueous sodium chloride is electrolyzed, hydrogen is produced at the negative electrode. Explain in terms of transfer of electrons why hydrogen, not sodium, is produced at the negative electrode. So basically, hydrogen ions gain electron more easily as compared to sodium ions. That is why we're talking about hydrogen ions over here. Alright, like that is why hydrogen and not sodium. Alright, because hydrogen gains electrons more easily than sodium ions, and sodium ions do not gain electrons that easily. That is why. So basically for this you need to look at the reactivity series, and the reactivity series can explain you that why does this happen, because we have rankings of different ions, that which is more reactive, which has more capability to gain electron and everything of that sort. So with that you can deduce. So for this you're supposed to learn the reactivity series. Alright, moving on to part E. A 36.3 gram sample of compound contains 14.4 carbon, 0.6 grams of hydrogen, and 21.3 grams of chlorine. Calculate the empirical formula of the compound. So basically this compound is total 36.3 grams, which has 14.4 grams of, okay, it's basically carbon is to hydrogen is to chlorine. Alright, and if we talk about the mass over here, it's 14.4 is to 0.6 is to 21.3. These are in grams, alright? And now we're supposed to divide it over here with the mass of carbon, which is 12, hydrogen is 1, and chlorine 35.5. Okay. Now after doing the entire calculation, the smallest value from it is supposed to go in division for all of it, and we will find the answer. So to keep it short, I am already writing it over here. It's going to be C2. Since I've calculated, we do not have enough space over here. C2 H and Cl. Alright. How will this come in answer? It's going to be 2 is to 1 is to 1. Alright, so after it, remember, after it we have the step in which we are supposed to divide it, and the smallest value of these all will be divided with the answers of all of these. Alright, and then in this way we can find the empirical formula. I hope it's clear. In case it's not clear, you can mention it down. Also, I have made a separate video on empirical formula which I link down in the description if you want to know how to find empirical formula in detail. This is it for the video. I hope you found it fruitful. If you have any queries, make sure you mention it down in the comment section and I'll try to address it. And make sure to share it with your friends and help everyone out. Thank you so much for watching and best of luck for your exams.